So welcome everyone. Today's session, I had originally been under the impression, for whatever reason, obviously mistaken, that there wasn't a great deal of interest on the part of our districts to participate in the FCC's new cybersecurity program. It turns out that a lot of you submitted or responded that you were interested in the sense that at least you wanted to attend this training. So what I thought was originally going to be an office hours kind of approach to just having folks drop in and ask some questions and sort of address things in that fashion with as much interest as there is, I felt like it was probably a good idea to at least give something of a brief overview of the program itself, just some of the basic tenets of the program and what's happening, what's going on, and some of the timeline kinds of things associated with it, some of the rules, some of the broader details. And then in the meantime, the FCC released the form that is used for applying to be a participant in the pilot program. And so that form 484, is now available. And so I decided that it would probably be a good idea and probably be helpful for all of you to at least take a look at it and give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have about that and to share some thoughts and ideas about how you might approach applying to be a part of the pilot if that's something that you ultimately decide that you want to do. So without further ado from me, I'm going to just jump right into our little PowerPoint here. It's only about 6 slides, so it'll be fairly quick. So if you would just bear with me, I appreciate that. An order adopted by the FCC on June 6th established a new cybersecurity pilot program, and this pilot program is intended to allow the FCC to essentially gather data and feedback on whether in the long run the FCC should do something to leverage the Universal Service Fund to support cybersecurity needs in schools and libraries going forward. Much as with the other FCC Universal Service Fund programs, USAC will be the administrator of the program. It will be a 3-year program. It will encompass overall $200 million. It will be capped at $200 million. And that $200 million will be pulled from unused or carryover E-rate funds from prior years. So this will not impact the contribution rate or future E-rate commitments. So it is going to be something that folks had requested and funds had been set aside for E-rate purchases. Not always are those funds expended in full, and in fact, every year there's always some sort of carryover. So they're going to use some carryover funds to fund this pilot project. Eligible entities will be able to request and receive support to purchase qualifying services and equipment related around cybersecurity and securing our networks. The budget for this will be based on a figure of $13 per student, $13.60 per student pre-discount. The school or district minimum of $25,000, so there's a floor that's established, and a school or district maximum of $1.5 million. So our very, very large schools will be capped at $1.5 million, no matter how many students they might have above and beyond the threshold that would get them to $1.5 million in terms of their ADA. Participants will be committed based on their Category 1 discount rate. So if you have an 80% Category 1 discount, your discount for the cybersecurity pilot would be also 80%. Be aware that obviously the 200 million will not fund all schools and all applicants. This is not something like E-rate where if you apply and you are and you're within the rules of the program in terms of your application, that your application will get funded. Um, in this particular case, the FCC is seeking to select a really broad, diverse cross-section of schools, libraries, and consortia with a focus on selecting applicants with the greatest need. So they are going to be factoring in need, but that's not the only thing. They want large schools, they want small schools, they want rural representation, they want urban representation, as well as just the schools that have the greatest financial need. So they really are looking to get a cross-section, a really good representation. Eligible entities include schools, school systems, that is districts, libraries, and library systems. Of course, that is library and library systems dealt with elsewhere. So we're really obviously just talking about schools. Schools and libraries not currently participating in the E-rate program are eligible. So yeah, the schools and libraries that are not currently participating in E-rate are still eligible to be participants in the pilot project. Consortia of eligible schools will also be funded based on the student count, again with a cap of 1.5 million as a pre-discount. So schools and eligible schools can band together to create a consortium and then apply as a group. Hopefully, then that would also provide some leverage to control cost and limit the overall cost for everyone. That's a part of the consortium. The eligible services in this are as follows in terms of the service categories. These are very broad categories, and then there are some specifics, and we'll see this when we get into the Form 484, but there are some very specific items and pieces of equipment and services that fall under each of these categories. But you have advanced and next-gen firewalls, endpoint protection, identity protection and authentication, monitoring, detection, and response, and then basic training only as a part of the initial installation or configuration of those other areas. So, for example, if you have a next-gen firewall that's going to be put in, you can also be eligible for some basic training about how to use that during the time when you are getting that next-gen firewall installed. So that's very similar to the E-rate program. And for what it's worth, you will see that the program itself, this pilot, is going to be run very similarly to E-rate in the long run, but there are some key elements that are different, and obviously we've touched on a few of those already, and we'll touch on a few more as we go forward. Specific functions and services are listed in the pilot eligible services list, which is available on the USAC Cybersecurity pilot website. I would encourage you, if you haven't already and you are interested in participating in the program, definitely want to find that site. And for what it's worth, I will post this. PowerPoint in the chat so that you have the link to it. You have the link to it right here. There are a couple other links in here that may be useful for you as well. So I will post this in the chat when the time has come. Or excuse me, when our time is up, I'll make sure that it's there available for you in the chat. So you have that. You have a special eligible services list that will give you a more clear breakdown of the eligible items that will fall under this program. There are some limitations to your eligibility. Anything that's already covered under E-rate is ineligible. Now that's kind of obvious because if it's already eligible under E-rate, it really doesn't need to be a part of this program. The services themselves must be either network-based, including cloud-based, or locally installed on end-user devices owned by the school and library. So you're not allowed to be putting those services or applying those services or equipment and services from those pieces of equipment to ineligible end-user devices. So they have to be school-owned in order for them to be eligible. The new Form 484 is required to apply to participate. Now, the 484 is going to be broken out into two parts. Part one is basically the application to be in the pilot. This is sort of your way of raising your hand and saying, yes, we want to be a part of this program. Part two will be used to collect additional information from the entities that are selected for participation. That is to say that if you are tapped as being one of the participants, you will then be asked to fill out part two of the Form 484, which will get into some more specific and what could be sensitive kinds of information. The reason why they didn't include that in the Form 484 Part 1 is because they didn't want to have any kind of sensitive security kinds of related information as a part of these initial applications. I think there was some security concerns that they were reacting to as far as making that decision. Beyond the initial selection, as I mentioned, the Form 484 Part 1, you will, and Part 2 afterwards, if you are tabbed, the service request process, the Form 470, and the funding application process will mimic E-rate, including the process of requesting services, going through competitive bidding, the reimbursement processes. I will say that they will, from the way that they've been speaking and the way that it's been written far, they will probably have a letter P in front of these to indicate that it's a part of this pilot project, so that you hopefully keep those kinds of things straight. So you've got a 484, you've got a P470, you've got a P471, you probably have a P472, which would be the bare form, a P474, which would be for the service providers as a pilot spy form. You are going to be subject, if you are a participant, you will be subject to all of the standard program integrity reviews, audits, documentation retention, asset inventory, certification requirements. All of those are going to be very similar to E-rate. So if you wondered how long you're going to have to keep all of your documentation, it'll probably be for 10 years. Well, I know it'll be for 10 years from last date to receive services under the pilot, which would technically then give you 13 years or more than 13 years for some of your documentation that you would have to maintain. So just be aware that those requirements continue to apply even though this is not directly an E-rate program. I mentioned your determining costs and reimbursement amounts will be based on your C1, your Category 1 E-rate discount rate. And you will be able to, unlike E-rate, you will be able to request reimbursement as your expenses are incurred over the course of the entire 3-year pilot. So you're going to be committed the amount of funds that you would request after, upon review of your program and PIA review. Once they have made a commitment to your budget of a certain amount for your budget, you will have 3 years in which to spend that. So unlike a funding year where you have only either 12 or 16 months or 12 or 15 months in order to spend your E-rate dollars, you will actually have the full 3 years. So you can, and you will have flexibility within that. So you can use more of than a third in any given year, but you will have, as I mentioned, up to 3 years in which to expend all of the committed funds. Existing contracts are not eligible. So if you have a contract that is for some of the services that you would like to apply for, that contract itself will not be eligible. Now, the FCC has said that there is a waiver that you can request. That having been said, they have indicated that the rules for getting that contract to getting a waiver for that contract would be only in the cases where a Form 470 was submitted for those services. Now, this gets into the whole, which came first, the chicken or the egg. If you applied for if you had services that you knew were not going to be eligible like a year ago or 2 years ago, you wanted to, let's just say, and I'm going to pull this out of my head, a next gen firewall. And I know that KDE provides the firewall, and I'm just using that as an example. If you applied for excuse me, if you established a contract for next gen firewalls 2 years ago, and it's a 5-year contract, it's still valid, but it's not going to be eligible. Why? Because 2 years ago, unless you did something really unusual, you did not include that firewall on any 470 that for which you would have applied for funding. So it's kind of a catch-22, which begs the question, why did they even allow for a waiver of some sort? Because it's kind of confusing in that fashion. So generally speaking, I think it's safe to just say that any existing contract is not eligible. In order to have an eligible contract, you will have to go through the Form 470 and competitive bidding process, as you are familiar with under the E-rate program. Your reimbursement, just like E-rate, can be a SPY or a bear. This will be specified by the applicant on the pilot funding application, the P Form 471. This is a little bit different than your existing Forms 471, where you do not indicate whether it's going to be a SPY or a bear. So you will need to work with your potential service providers when that time comes along, to make sure that you have established very clearly between yourselves and them who is going to be responsible for reimbursement, applying for reimbursement. And always, as is always, the reimbursement deadline was going to be within 90 days of the last day to receive services. What exactly that date is, we don't know yet, because we don't know when what day one of the 3-year period is going to be, let alone the last date. But whatever that last date is of that 3-year period, it will be 90 days after that. There will be an additional set of reporting requirements in support of the goals of the pilot. So be aware that throughout throughout your participation in the program, should you be selected, you will be asked to provide additional information to the FCC so that they have the information that they need in order to make their determinations in the long term as to whether or not to add cybersecurity as an element permanently to the E-rate landscape. The appeals and waivers process will operate similarly to E-rate. SIPA applies, as it always does, to E-rate. It will apply to any of the activities under this CPP. And then I would encourage you, for announcements and the latest on upcoming trainings, make sure that you sign up for the Cybersecurity Pilot News Brief. That comes out every 2 weeks or so. Actually, right now, I think it's just been once a week because things are being announced on a regular basis. Again, the USAC is going to continue to provide trainings and information throughout this process. And just with that in mind, they do have one scheduled for next Tuesday. It's an office hour sessions where you're going to be able to come in and ask application related questions. If you have questions about the 484, hopefully you'll be able to receive some answers from USAC staff. They will not be any new information during those sessions. It's really just a drop in and ask your questions kind of thing, or drop in and listen to the questions that are being asked. But registration is available online, and also there's a link in this PowerPoint, so you'll be able to register through that as well. The deadline for filing the Form 484 Part 1 is 11:59 p.m. November 1st of 2024. So you basically have about a month and a couple of days. About 2 weeks. About a month, a little bit more. After this, the FCC will select participants from the P1 applications, the Part 1, the 484 Part 1 applications, and then they will inform those who have been selected. Selections are expected to be announced prior to the end of the calendar year. I should certainly hope so, and hopefully even sooner. But seeing as November 1, they're going to have a lot of applications to sift through. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly they turn that around and let folks know that they are going to be participating and that they've been selected. And then once you've been selected, then additional guidance will be provided to you as an applicant once those selections are announced. Obviously, there will be some specifics related around the P Form 470 and the P Form 471, and any differences that from E-rate, I'm sure will be providing that information. Just as an overview, any questions as far as that's concerned? Proper wait time. Go back to my old teaching days. Okay, so I get the feeling that we're done with that. So next up, I am going to switch the screens that I'm sharing. So you should now be seeing, hopefully you're seeing the training site, the portal where I usually use our Forms 470 and 471 E-rate trainings. This is what I use. It should look very familiar. It also should look very similar to your own. If you are like me, I ran into difficulty in locating how to access the Form 484. When you first jump in and log into Epic, it gives you those couple of different options. There's ECF that's there, and then there's E-rate, so you can choose one or the other of those programs. But nothing was there about the cybersecurity pilot project, and I couldn't find any instruction anywhere really to find how to access this in Epic. But I just happened to go up to this little tic-tac-toe board thing, and I wonder what's in there, because I knew that invoicing was there, but they've added the cybersecurity pilot program to that. So in order to get to the dashboard that will show you your application for participating in the cybersecurity pilot program, you click on this, select the cybersecurity pilot program, and it will take you to a separate dashboard that now will allow you to access the form. So once you are here, if you are going to apply, click on the link here in the action under My Organizations. Should list your school district here under the Ben name. If you click on this, it will open up the form. Now, from a technical point of view, this works very much like what you're accustomed to in other applications, other forms within Epic. So the look and feel should be fairly similar. This first one is just a notice and lots of legal mumbo jumbo. I do encourage you to take a look at it, just kind of skim through it, make sure that you understand. There are a couple of conditional type statements. If you owe a past debt, you may not be eligible. If you do not provide the information we request, we may dismiss you without any action or deny a request to participate in the program if you've answered something the wrong way that you don't even know what that might be. But nonetheless, it's sort of the forewarning that you need to be aware of. Started. So there's our favorite term, save and continue. And this will begin by looking very, very similar to any standard Form 470 application that you are accustomed to seeing. So as you enter a nickname, again, I'm going to do what I usually do in my trainings, and then just blow through these kinds of things. They're very simple. You should be able to figure out very quickly what they are all about. Are you the main contact person? If you are, click yes. If you are not, you click no, and then we'll ask you to identify who that person is. Make sure that person is the person that you want to be the main contact is an Epic user. They will have to be an Epic user in order for you to identify them as the main contact person. It asks for summer contact or holiday contact information. If you know that you're going to be out, and you've heard me say this about E-rate, if you know that you're going to be out, for example, over the holiday break in the winter, and you know that you're going to be missing or off the grid for a couple of weeks, just make sure that you make mention of it here so that they know that going forward, there will be a time period where it may be difficult to, or better not to reach out to you if they have some questions about your application. Save and continue. All right, so now we're going to build out our organization and which schools within our organization are going to participate. You can click simply here to add all of the entities. You'll note that the only entities that come up are schools. They are not non-instructional facilities. So basically, the services that you're going to apply for or to provide under this program are intended for the use of the schools. Now, that having been said, there may be some ancillary use that occurs at a non-instructional facility, much like with with Category 2 kinds of things. You may be expected to do some sort of cost allocation to account for the cost associated with that service that ends up being delivered to a non-instructional facility. So be aware that cost allocation still is in play as we go forward. If you only have a certain subset of schools within your district, you can use this Add Specific Entities button to then go and select particularly which one. You would click Add, and it will drop it into the selected entities. I think probably most of you are going to be looking to provide services to your entire district, so we'll go with that, and then click Next. Note that I'm not clicking Save and Continue yet. It actually gives me that next. This next one just gives me a list of the schools that I've selected just to be able to confirm. Now we go on to Save and Continue, and that will take us to the cybersecurity plan. You can see that we have these the breadcrumbs across the top to show us our progress as we move through these forms, or through this form. Save and Continue. All right, so now we're going to get into the meat of the program. And this gives me an opportunity to just point out a couple of things. One is these major text fields are still limited to only 5,000 characters. You may, in fact, have more to say than is capable of being said in 5,000 characters. My recommendation to you is to be sure to just do your write-ups in something like Word or some other text program. Do a character count and make sure that it's under 5,000, or if it is over, then I would either pare it back and then have a more complete document that has all of what you wanted to share in it. You will have the ability at the end of this section on the cybersecurity plan. You can see that it asks for supporting documentation. So anytime you have any kinds of documentation, you will have the opportunity to upload that in your plan, including an expanded executive summary or other, you're asked to provide a description of your plan in some detail. If 5,000 characters isn't enough, obviously then you'd want to use that supporting documentation option that we'll have once we get through this plan. Another thing worth noting is that because of the way that this is being implemented, I think it's going to be helpful for you to treat this a lot like a grant program. Even though it's not a grant program technically, at least the part that's going to lead you to be selected, hopefully you'll be selected, is I think you're going to be best served to think about this and contemplate it as if it were a grant program. You're going to have goals, you're going to have plans, you're going to have services. You're going to need to be able to identify how that plan will lead to success. You're going to have to be able to identify the measures that will be used. What metrics are you going to use? And we'll get into this. You'll see this as we go forward. I am going to move through this fairly quickly. So if you do have specific questions, feel free to jump in. But the idea here is just to give you kind of a sense of what it is that you're going to be asked for. There is a user guide for this form 470, for this form 484. There is a user guide available on the Cybersecurity Pilot Project website. I would encourage you to download it, look through it, be familiar with what it's asking. It does give you some additional guidance that doesn't exist here within the framework of EPIC. So starts with an executive summary. You're going to give it. You're going to give a broad overview to the project, and you can see that there's some pretty solid guiding text here to guide how you respond. But think of it as this is your place where you're going to give the big picture, what you're trying to accomplish, how you're going to know that that you're getting where you want to go. You're going to describe how your project funding will be used. So these are, interestingly enough, they're just going to be, these start with simple check marks, but then in the text box below, this is where you're going to describe in some detail how spending on one or more of these areas is going to be implemented, what you're going to purchase more specifically, discuss the types of equipment, services you plan to purchase, excuse me, and then and how you see those expenditures helping you manage your networks and protect them from various cybersecurity risks. Again, that's a 5,000 character limit, so you may need additional space to respond. The cybersecurity risks proposed pilot project will prevent or address. So what it's going to ask you for what kinds of threats, what kinds of compromises, what kinds of issues are you going to be able to address under the program that you're going to institute. Note that these are select as many as apply, rather than just simply a drop-down menu where you have to select one. So if it applies, then absolutely you'd want to select it and make sure that it's part of your list. You can only see them one at a time, so make sure that you check your drop-down menu once you entered them, just to make sure that it's actually captured what you entered. Pilot project implementation and operation. Section 1.4, this is asking you for the primary area of focus for your project. So it's going to only be select one. That is to say that if you are going to do something where you touch on a number of these, and it's very possible, there's a lot of crossover and carryover from one to the next. So obviously, you can't select multiple ones here. So whichever one you feel is the most, is where you're spending most of your time and your money, that's probably the one that you would want to select here. The goals and objectives. Which goals and objectives do you intend to address? Again, this is a select all that apply. So you're going to want to make sure that you're getting any and all of the ones that pertain to your intended program or your intended project. Section 2 is going to ask you about best practices, your project details. There are some there are recommended cybersecurity best practices out there that have been provided by multiple different organizations. Department of Education, Homeland Security, CISA, NIST, our guru Bob Hackworth has been out and about providing all sorts of support and information about that as well. So,
and Scott, one thing I will say is that a lot of districts have cybersecurity insurance, and a lot of those in order to get the insurance, then a lot of the insurers require that folks meet certain requirements from another security framework, such as NIST, that sort of thing. And so if you are a district who's utilizing cybersecurity insurance, you might look at that as being like the best practices that you are implementing, for example. Now, I do generally follow NIST, but I have not like thrown the whole NIST cybersecurity framework out there at every district and said, okay, you got to follow this. It's like I'm looking at the items that are going to provide the most bang for the buck, no matter what size the district is, no matter how many people you've got to support security and technology, that sort of stuff. The real important you got to do it now stuff. Uh, some of these other frameworks, some of your other folks you're working with will provide a lot more of that information to you. And I can send out more information about CISA and NIST here shortly. If anyone has any interest in that, send it out via the KEs. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you, Bob. That's why it's another good example of why we wanted you to be along here. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Whether or not you have already, the question then, the follow-up 2.1b is whether or not you plan to implement any additional ones. So you may already be doing so, but there may be additional ones that you are going to implement as a part of the project that you are going to implement in your district. So in which case you would be saying yes here as well. These are simple yes questions, but you will notice as we go forward that sometimes, depending upon whether you click a yes or a no, you may get additional pop-up questions that seek additional information from you. So you'll see that as we go forward. And in fact, I think you'll see that here very shortly. The ability of your proposed pilot project to be self-sustaining. Basically, I think, and this is another one of those items that really makes it feel more like a grant than it does an E-rate program at times. This is a good example of one. Oftentimes, for those of you who have been involved in the grant writing process, one of the key elements to a grant is explaining how the project implemented under the grant will be continued beyond the grant period. I would encourage you to have some sort of plan or idea about how you would carry this forward. I suspect that there will be very few, if any, projects that are funded that actually indicate no here on 2.2a. 2.2b, you can choose whatever applies, local funding, state funding, and whichever applies, make sure that you include those there. The fact that you can use KETS funds to support cybersecurity would make state funding an ongoing source for supporting the sustainability of the project that you're proposing. Network equipment, hardware, and software, software, and services. Hardware and software services, excuse me. Using the eligible services list, they want you to select the equipment and or services that you plan to request as a part of your project. So obviously, we're getting into this idea that you really do need to have a comprehensive sort of plan for how you're going to go about this and what it is that you need, not just I need better endpoint protection. You really need to get into understanding what specifically you're going to do with respect to endpoint protection. Is it malware, ransomware, anti-spam, virus, these kinds of things, EDR, XDR, et cetera, et cetera. You can look through those and select those. You'll notice, obviously, that each one of these has a rather extensive list associated with them. So whatever ones apply, if you are seeking a combination of some of these things, then obviously you're going to want to make selections from each one of them in terms of the overall categories and then the specifics that you are selecting. Training, and that's just a simple one. But if you expect to get some training, then absolutely you want to include that as well. Notice also that as we're doing this cybersecurity plan, I'm using the next and previous buttons. Be aware that once you get into this section, the cybersecurity plan section, if you leave right now, nothing has been saved. You would make sure that you want to click save and exit. and then you'll be able to come back to it later and not lose anything. But if you jump out right now while you're using these previous and next buttons, you will lose what you've entered so far. So just a sort of key element there to make sure that you're aware of as you progress. By the way, if you click that Save and Continue button, it will take you to the supporting documentation section, not the next section of the security plan. So just be aware that you do need to use this next and previous buttons to fill out the details of your plan. Next, do you have any previous experience in implementing cybersecurity protection measures? I'm sure a lot of you do have at least some experience. So you'd probably be clicking yes there, and then you're going to use your drop-down menus again once for each of the categories that apply. You would certainly then fill out and select which ones apply to your experience. Again, you've got multiple ones if you need, and it isn't just a select one and move on.
Scott, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Quite all right. Please.
Neil Arnett has a question in the chat. He's asking, is there a link to an eligible services list specific to the cyber pilot?
I'm sure there is. I will make sure that it's linked somewhere in the PowerPoint before I upload it. I mean, if you go to the Cybersecurity Pilot Project website, it is available there for download. All right, and then as a follow-up, they want to know approximately how long you've had experience with dealing with those kinds of things, or you or whomever is going to be your resident expert. Again, similar kind of iterative thing here. If you say, no, we don't have any member of our consortium currently receive or expect to receive any funding, you say no there, it's a no, and nothing else happens. If you say yes, then it's going to ask you for additional information about where, for example, in 3.2a, where are those funds coming from? Now, 3.3 mentions cyber incidents. Have you had any cybersecurity incident, a threat or attack in the last year? We had some conversation about this, and I think really it's important to mention that we're really talking about not only a threat or attack, because quite honestly, as Bob has really very almost strikingly pointed out, the number of sheer attempts to compromise our K-12 network resources across Kentucky is huge. I mean, it's just a staggering number. I think, though, that really what we're really focusing on here is not only there was a threat or there was an attack, but it was something that you actually had to respond to in some fashion, rather than just I wish I knew more about this, a malware threat that was identified by something and by something already in place, and it was automatically automatically protected or rejected.
And Scott, you're absolutely right. I think what we're saying here is not only and I think what the question is actually saying is not only have you been attacked, because I think we've all been attacked, but were you successfully attacked? That's the way I read this anyway. And have you had a successful malware attack? Now, having said that, I do not work for USAC, and if you want to, it's up to you to choose how you interpret this question. I'm just saying I interpret it as, have you had an actual cybersecurity incident where someone attacked you and somehow there was a compromise? That's the part that this question doesn't say, and there was a compromise. Otherwise, you can interpret this question however you would like. But I'm kind of thinking that they're intending to get a compromise as well as just an attack. Thanks.
I would agree, Bob. Thank you. Yeah. Now that having been said, if you have some sort of device or filtering that's taking place, that's doing some of that protection for you, and you have some metrics about how often or how much of them how you're receiving in terms of even those that are automatically turned away. It's not inappropriate to at least share that information somewhere within the plan or within, for example, the executive summary. You can mention that as well. So it's not necessarily that you have to have been compromised in order to somehow think that you knew you would be eligible. Under the program. I think they're really just wanting to know whether or not you've had an incident, as Bob says, that has resulted in some sort of breach of the standard operations of your network.
Scott, we have another
Yeah.
question in the chat.
Okay.
Jeremy Simpson, he's asking if you pay for something now, but it's not under contract, can we still apply for pilot to help cover future costs of the product?
I lost you verbally on the last couple of words of that question.
Okay, if you pay for something now, but it's not under contract, can we still apply for pilot to help cover future costs of that product?
I don't see why not. I really don't. I don't see why not. You've got no contract that would have to be voided or something in some fashion. You're not receiving funds for it. Obviously, it's not eligible anyway. So, if it's not under contract already, you could go through the process of filing a form P470, and go through the competitive bidding process for that same set of services, and then establish a contract that would ultimately be eligible under the pilot if you were to be selected as a participant. So I think I don't see a problem with that at all. Good question. Any other questions coming up so far?
I know Kyle Beveridge has a question. He says, as we prepare to share details with USAC regarding our plans to harden our systems, he said that he wanted to address the concern, and his concern was, are we worried that by providing too much detail, we might inadvertently create a playbook for potential threats if there's a breach within USAC? He goes on, then he goes on to say, I don't know if you want to answer that part first, but he says, should we attempt to strike a balance detailed enough for it to make sense and show our efforts, but vague enough to avoid outlining a roadmap for any bad actors?
I completely understand the question, and yes, you should not be giving any kind of roadmap that would help someone with malintent to take advantage of that. Absolutely. That is kind of fundamentally the purpose of having a part 2 of this. During part 2, I'm sure they will be asking very much more specific questions that may actually have the potential to provide that kind of roadmap. But that's the whole point of having a secondary part of the Form 484, so as to not include that in the initial phase of this process. And then there was a follow-up as far as that's concerned.
Yes. I think you got the follow-up.
Oh, did I?
And
okay.
Yeah, I think you did. It was, attempt to strike a balance. And I would agree that I don't think we want to put every card on the table, but we need to provide enough information to make it a compelling application. And I also would say that there are probably, there's nothing new under the sun here. None of these defenses that we're applying for are so novel that we're the first ones to have done it. And so I just want to kind of throw that out there too. I wouldn't be super concerned, but I agree with what Scott said. We don't want to pull the covers back too far.
Absolutely. All right.
I think there's one more. I don't know if you all answered that already, but John Esteps, he says, what if a single product fulfills more than one of those 4 service types, like endpoint protection and monitoring detection? Will funding requests have to be broken down for each service type somehow?
I don't know that it needs to be broken down, but if you're purchasing if you're planning to purchase, let's say, a single device or a single service, and that service or that multiple aspects of security, then I would identify all of those aspects of the cybersecurity that device addresses. I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. It does to me, but what makes sense in my mind is often not the case outside of my mind. So do ask if you have additional follow-ups on that. Asking if you're going to be a member of any cybersecurity collaboration or information sharing groups. If you say yes, that's going to ask you specifically which of those do you belong to already. You got a bunch of different options here.
Hey, Scott.
Apply. Yes.
So there was one more question that I want to address. Bruce Lindsay left it before he had to bug out for just a second. But his question was, since this is a pilot, will USAC and other folks be looking for feedback on how everything's going, similar to how we do here with an OET?
I can't say it's going to be similar in terms of the process, but absolutely there will be points in time where FCC/USAC will be asking for additional information, and they will be asking for specifics about how things are going. What metrics are you using, and what do those metrics tell you in terms of the numbers and the actual statistics associated with those metrics. So,
and
what are you measuring? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, not at all. I apologize. And aside from feedback, there's another word that I think is even a little more interesting, and that's oversight. And so do you think there will be additional or more oversight than they provide for other things? Or do you think it's going to be do what you want to do and then let us know what worked?
I tend to think that it will be more the latter. I don't think that this is intended to be prescriptive. I think they are really trying to find out what is happening. What are the best practices? What are the costs associated that they know of, and maybe even determining unknown costs at this time. And so I do think that there will be probably, obviously they haven't gotten into the specifics about this yet, so it's difficult. You're asking me to prognosticate based upon what's been shared so far, and basically that goes back to the order that created the program in the first place, and even that doesn't say much more other than we are going to be asking you for additional information as you go through the process. But that's asking for information. It doesn't lead me to believe that they're going to be telling you this is what you need to be doing with your particular project. I think it's far less, it's more to be, they're going to be seeking descriptive information rather than providing prescriptive guidance. Another good question, though. So, are you a member currently of any cybersecurity collaboration or information sharing groups? If yes, yes, no, no. Cybersecurity at the state level, regional or regional agents. That might be just simply sharing some of the conversations that we've had part of the state activities within the CATS program. So that would be included, and then there's an ask you for a date for when you might be starting to take part of that. We just make say November 1, so it's simple down on that. They want to know whether or not you're going to have someone as a designated cybersecurity officer or other senior level staff who will serve as the designated officer if you are selected as part of the pilot project. I would tend to think you're going to want to say yes here. I think they're going to want to have somebody identified as sort of the lead in the program. And it could be you, and that's fine. But I think generally speaking, you're going to want to have a yes here, and then they're going to ask you, well, what are you or whoever that person is going to be responsible for? What is it that they're going to be doing to serve that? And then we get into free and low-cost cybersecurity resources. Do you plan to use any of the free and low-cost security resources? Again, I think they're probably going to want to see that there's effort that's going to be made to do more than just here's some money and go spend it and buy some stuff and put it in place and let it do its thing. I think they're going to be looking to see that again, it's that sort of grant mindset rather than E-rate mindset, subsidy mindset that you want to have in mind here as you fill these things out. So yeah, go ahead.
Real quickly, if you could click on the CISA free and low cost tools there.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And if you see up there, sign up for cyber hygiene services. That's what I was asking districts to do prior to the end of June this year. And that is that free external network vulnerability scanning service from CISA. So that would be something that I hope everyone at this point can at least select and say, yes, we're taking advantage of. Some of the other things we're still looking at, and I know a couple of districts have some pilots going on of some of the other free resources. We hope to be doing the same thing ourselves. But right now, for sure, I hope everyone's doing that free cyber hygiene services. Okay, over and out. Thanks.
Sure, thanks. And you mentioned NIST earlier as well. There's some that might be included as well.
There are a lot of free services from MSISAC, if any of the districts are members of MSISAC. So I encourage you to, if you are a member, take advantage of some of those. I'll be sending out some more opportunities that have recently come into my email today for folks to take advantage of.
Cool. Good deal. Thanks. Again, it's going to ask you, when you started to or when you plan to start utilizing those resources. Next. All righty. Pretty close to the end here. Good deal. Funding for non-cybersecurity equipment services that support cybersecurity. Do you or your consortium have access to cover the cost of any non-cybersecurity equipment and services necessary to support this program? So basically, you think it's available to support the equipment that gets plugged into E-rate supported services. And I was just saying that I think this is probably one of those items that if you say no, you're probably putting yourself in the big giant round file of 484 applications. Will the service provider be required to include any no-cost cybersecurity equipment? These next two items, 5.2 and 5.3, are really, really touchy. And there's been a great deal of discussion both internally at KDE and even externally with the state E-rate coordinators group about what's the right answer here. And these are really, really touchy kinds of questions, because those of you familiar with E-rate know that there are gift rules that can get you in trouble. You can't ask for free services when you go out to bid. So it's difficult to suggest, well, you should be asking for free services. And yet they ask the question here. It feels like one of those old-fashioned gotcha questions. So my tendency is to say perhaps no, but then again, this also could be one of those questions where, when we think about it from a grant point of view, well, yes, you want to be using as many free resources as possible. So this is a touchy question. I really wish I had better guidance to provide on 5.2 and 5.3. But I think with 5.3, it's a little bit safer to say yes. You're going to ask them to utilize existing tools and resources as a part of the services they supply. But in terms of asking them to provide it to you for free, that's a really touchy one. It's a really touchy one. Now, when you say yes on either one of these, and I'll just show you what happens, it is going to ask you which of these are you going to ask them to provide free services for. So that it gets that deep kind of suggests that maybe they are looking for that. But yikes, I wish they had been more clear about how what it is that they're asking for in those questions. If you do answer yes on any of them, then it will ask you for which ones are you going to ask your support services to utilize, or your contracted services, your service provider to supply or use. Again, these are select all that apply, so just be aware that it's not just a single drop down. 5.4, cost. Here you're going to provide some basic broad cost generalizations. We know that you're not going to be able to provide a specific budget at this point in time because you haven't even gone out to bid yet. So you have no idea in a specific sense how much it's going to cost you. In a broader sense, you can sort of estimate how much you anticipate requesting, and that's really what they're going to ask you here. So the estimated cost of the pilot eligible services and equipment, and that might be the cost of that might be, I don't know, 30,000. Again, these are numbers I'm just sort of making up at this point. Your total might be more than that. It might be it might be less than that, because you know that you're going to be receiving you're 90% of it. So if you got a 10% discount, then you know that your estimated funding request will be at least 10% less than that. How much do you anticipate being a shared cost that you are going to cover? And at the very least, that would be the difference between those two. I suspect that you probably earn yourself a few quote unquote points towards things if you are going to invest some additional local funds to support some of the ineligible items, and that would be down here. I put that in the wrong spot. This one's the estimated cost for the participant share. That might be the total cost of the participant share. No, that might also be 3,000. So, oops. And then the total overall cost, that might be even greater than the 30,000 initially, if you know that there are other things that you are going to be adding to and supporting yourselves locally, but that are associated with the broader project.
Hey, Scott, this is Jeremy Simpson.
Yes.
Is this dollar amount for the full 3 years or what it is for 1 year?
Yes. 3 years. Yes.
10-4.
3 years. Good question. And then it's going to ask the select the sources of financial support you'll use to be paying the non-discounted share. Again, drop down. You could be using state, could be using local. If there's other other grants or other resources you might have, those might be apply as well. And then the plan to cover the cost of the ineligible items. Local for sure, could be state as well. Those would be in there. And then next. And our last section here is on the metrics. Are you and the members of your contract prepared to share the data you will collect and the metrics you will use to assess some of the outcomes? Again, this is going to be one of those things where I think if you say no, you're not willing to share it, then they're not going to, you're probably eliminating yourself from the competition. Cost effectiveness data and metrics collected by your service provider. Are you going to ask your service provider to collect, track and measure any data to help determine the cost effectiveness of the pilot program? Again, I think you're probably going to want to be asking your service provider to provide any metrics or any details that that may be above and beyond what is also associated with whatever they are providing in terms of services and or equipment. And then they ask if you're prepared to share the data as a part of your project for data collection purposes. Again, I think you're going to want to be saying yes here. And then certainly last but not least, we've got awareness and readiness data and metrics collected by the service provider. And are you going to ask them to help you determine your overall project success? And again, you're going to want to be saying yes. I would think you'd want to be saying yes anyway. And then are you prepared to share that data back as a part of your participation? Again, if you're saying no there, you're probably putting yourself in, probably hamstringing yourself in terms of your ability to, or your likelihood of being selected. Okay, so those are the 6 sections of the cybersecurity plan. Move on to the next page, and it's really just your documentation. If you have supporting documentation or additional files that you want to use to support your case, or you have your executive summary or any of those text fields has additional information, here's where you would just simply click add a row and then drag and drop your file here. It's going to ask you what category or what kind of whether it's file, image, or email. Put a description in then and then save it, and you're good to go. Do that for any of them. Oh, sorry. Delete that and then save and continue. Oh, look at that. I had this happen to me the other day, and I recall that I had left one question unanswered on the I left empty one of the amounts requested for okay, so we're going to refresh. Let's see if we can
Scott, while you're taking care of that, I'm just going to remind folks that even though we're over time, that this is being recorded. And if you need to jump off and come back and rewatch, then that'll be a possibility.
Yeah, see, I didn't put anything in some of these. So if you miss one, it's going to get you to the end, and then it's going to ask you to make sure that you've responded to all of them in some fashion or form. I think I'm good there. Yep. State, yep. Here's another good example. I didn't select a date. So it's easy for you to skip over a couple of these here and there, not realizing that in the end, it's going to ask you, okay, so now I did put dollar amounts in for each of these this time, which makes sense because when I first did it, I didn't, and that was what was holding me back. Got there, save, continue. Missed another one. I'll stop at this point. The certifications, make sure you read them through just to know that what you're certifying. But basically, those certifications are going to be very, very similar to what you would find in E-rate. In the E-rate certifications for your Form 471, where you're agreeing to the various terms and conditions, things like your document retention, you're subject to audits, the SIPA applies. Some of the stuff that I talked about really right at the very beginning, excuse me, will also be addressed in those, excuse me, in those certifications. So I do encourage you to make sure that you are aware of what it is to which you are attesting before you actually go ahead and click the certify button. But when you are ready, you go ahead and click that certify button after you've checked off all the certification check boxes, and you'll be ready to go. So I've thrown, obviously I've kind of turned the proverbial fire hose on at you and turned it on full blast. So questions at this point in time? I understand if, you're sort of feeling overwhelmed at this point, sure what it is you're not sure about at this point. But at any point along this process, don't hesitate to reach out to myself, to Caprice, Bob, any other resources that you can think of. Feel free, your CATS engineer. We're more than happy to provide thoughts, guidance, assistance in any way, shape, or form that we can in order to support you in your endeavors. If there are not any additional questions, then I think I will go ahead and stop the recording, but I do want to give everybody an opportunity to ask any additional questions. A pre-discount budget of $40.80 per student for the 3-year program. Jeremy, are you asking if you get...
Yeah, CDWG had sent out an email earlier today saying a pre-discount budget of $40.80 per student for the 3-year program was created. I'm just verifying that as to what the amount is per student each year, because that's what's going to help us to calculate what our budget is.
It's $13.60 per student per year. So
over the course
you do
of
the math
full
on it.
3 years, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yes.
And what was that amount again, Scott? You said $13.
I think it's $13.60. If I do the math on that, $13.60. Yeah. Other questions? That's another good one. Okay. As I was mentioning, please don't hesitate to give us a call, drop us an email, and thank you all for dropping in today. I really do appreciate it, and I wish you all the very best of luck in your endeavors. I hope that at least a few of our Kentucky districts will be a part of this project and will participate, because it would be great to have the Kentucky experience be a part of feeding into ultimately what happens with this. And hopefully that will mean that in the long run, maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the road, your participation will have helped inform the inclusion of some at least cybersecurity components, eligible services and equipment, and hopefully we will then see those become a part of the E-rate program in a much broader sense down the road. So with that said, thank you all very much, and I'll hang on at the end here. I'll turn off the recording, and folks can ask for any additional questions if they would like. Thank you all very much.